Join us and discover beautiful beaches, rugged landscapes, pretty towns, desolate mountain ranges that sweep down to stunning lakes, unique architecture, history and folklore, no shamrocks, no shillelaghs, and definitely no shenanigans, just naked Ireland. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a much disputed key element of the Brexit withdrawal agreement negotiated between the British government and the European Union. It's necessary to state from the outset that the protocol exists solely because the UK chose to leave the EU, and also because of the type of Brexit arrangements signed by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the EU, often described as a hard Brexit. Other ideas to mitigate potential damage to the peace process in Ireland were considered but thought unworkable. This video aims to explain the protocol and with all the necessary context that you need to understand why it's there. There's a lot of nuance that might be missed here in what is after all a short YouTube video, but this explanation aims to give you the facts, and if you're interested in getting into the detail in order to form your own opinion, you can choose to do more reading around the subject. It might be necessary to remind viewers from outside Ireland and the UK that Ireland has been divided in two parts since the treaty between the Irish and the British in 1921. Viewers who are familiar with how the state of Northern Ireland came about and its implications might want to skip past this next bit and fast forward to where I start talking directly about the protocol. But otherwise, bear with me, we're getting to the explanation of the protocol, believe me. The Partition of Ireland came about after an uprising in Ireland in 1916 and then following the War of Independence. This led to Ireland separating from Britain and becoming the Irish Free State and eventually the Republic of Ireland. However, this separation from Britain was partial. The Protestant minority, identifying as British, who lived in the north of the island, refused to accept being absorbed into the new Irish state, and so the partitioned state of Northern Ireland was created by the British and forced upon the Irish negotiators with the threat of all-out war if this condition of the treaty was not accepted. A civil war in Ireland followed between those who felt the need to accept the treaty on offer as a stepping stone to full independence in the future, and those who couldn't tolerate the partition and wanted to continue the War of Independence. The Civil War was won by the pro-treaty forces, and Northern Ireland became a separate state within the UK, with a boundary carefully drawn, not to include all of the northern province of Ulster, but 6 of the 9 counties, so as to maintain a Protestant majority and thereby safeguarding it as a part of the UK for the next 100 years and perhaps beyond. In that 100 years since the treaty was signed, the demographics have changed substantially, to the extent that it's now thought that there could be as much support for Irish unity as for remaining in the UK. So why all this background? Well, it's necessary because the state of Northern Ireland, having been contentious since its inception, was constantly plagued by trouble and sectarian strife. This was most notable between the period of 1969 and 1998 that we call the Troubles. For the most part, Catholics remaining in Northern Ireland saw themselves as Irish and resented discrimination in terms of jobs and housing by a Protestant unionist government. After the suppression of the nationalist civil rights movement by the Protestant police force and special constabulary, and then the appearance of British soldiers on the street, and with the emergence of paramilitaries on both sides, the Troubles saw Northern Ireland descend into a spiral of paramilitary violence in which over 3,000 people were killed. The situation was largely resolved with the 1998 Good Friday Peace Agreement. After this point, paramilitaries disarmed and the British Armed Forces withdrew from Northern Ireland. Many of their most fortified military installations were along the border crossings between the two states. There are hundreds of these crossings, and those that couldn't be manned by military personnel were simply closed by blocking them with large concrete blocks. Since the dismantling of this military infrastructure, paramilitary disarmament and the power sharing agreement, Northern Ireland has seen over 20 years of relative peace. One of the things that the UK and the Republic of Ireland had in common with each other since 1973 is membership of the EEC and then the EU. Both countries shared this common affiliation until Brexit. This was significant in terms of peace in Ireland for the following reasons. First, after the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, when British military installations were removed from the border between Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, because both jurisdictions were in the EU and enjoyed the same trading arrangements and freedom of movement, the border effectively became invisible. This allowed nationalists in Northern Ireland to feel that there was less of a distinction between where they lived and the Republic of Ireland that they aspired to join someday. Meanwhile, Northern Protestants were still part of the UK. The EU acted as a kind of common denominator. Secondly, a new generation of young people in Northern Ireland have grown up now with more of a European outlook, no longer necessarily identifying as nationalist or unionist. However, after Brexit, the disappearance of schemes such as Erasmus, or not having the ability to work and live freely in European neighbour states is a source of concern for some of them. So now to the protocol. But just before we move on, please consider supporting this video by liking it. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll be helping support the creation of future videos, so thanks for that. Anyway, the protocol. As we mentioned, the Republic of Ireland was also a member of the EU alongside the UK. Therefore, the British decision to leave the EU immediately suggests that the border between the parts of the island once again is in danger of becoming a significant structure. This, after all, will become the new EU frontier. Given the fact that both the European Union and the British government have agreed that there should not be infrastructure on the Irish border, and in the light of the commitment to the Good Friday Agreement, the protocol was negotiated jointly by the British and the European sides in order to find a solution to a problem that once again threatened peace on the island. The solution to this problem, the protocol, instead of reinstating the border, puts the customs checks at the ports of Belfast and Larne in Northern Ireland. We've already mentioned the principal reason for doing this, to preserve peace on the island. However, there is another thoroughly practical reason for this arrangement, and that is to focus customs principally on two ports that are at the point of entrance and exit of all goods, Larne and Belfast. It's infinitely easier than putting infrastructure around a 300-mile border with absolutely hundreds of crossings. So this was the argument for the EU border effectively being in the Irish Sea. The peculiarity of the negotiated arrangement between Boris Johnson's government and the EU is that Northern Ireland continues to follow some of the EU single market rules as regards product standards. This is effectively to align Northern Ireland somewhat with the Republic of Ireland, and again is necessary to eliminate the need for border or customs checks in Ireland. This last point means that there are distinct advantages for businesses in Northern Ireland trading with the EU in that they have easier access to this market than their counterparts in Britain. However, it means that there are some restrictions on trade east to west, in other words between Northern Ireland and Britain. These regulations at the ports of Larne and Belfast focus mainly on items of food products, things like milk or eggs, which the EU feels the need to control so that they continue to comply with their strict standards on food. The EU and UK have been negotiating further to try and simplify the checks on these products, and in one important area, that of medicines, some progress has been made. It's fair to say, however, that the British government have been under some pressure by unionists in Northern Ireland, notably the DUP, and by some of their conservative backbenchers to ditch the protocol altogether. This has led to the British government threatening to implement Article 16 of the agreement, which would trigger a postponement of the protocol due to what the British government see as a grievance. This postponement would enable both sides to enter talks again to resolve the dispute. In fact, the exact phrasing within the withdrawal document that can justify the implementation of Article 16 is serious economic, societal or environmental difficulties that are liable to persist or to diversion of trade. In other words, in order to use this safeguard, as it's known in treaty speak, the British government must prove that serious economic, societal or environmental difficulties exist as a result of the protocol. However, this must assume that the protocol has been properly implemented in the first place and problems worked through as far as possible. And this is one of the difficulties, that there is a reluctance, particularly on the part of Northern Ireland unionists, to engage with the terms of the protocol, as they see it as treating Northern Ireland differently to the rest of the UK, and therefore it's become more of an ideological hurdle for them than purely an economic one. In the case of the British government, they've kicked the can down the road with its unilateral extension of the grace period put in place to allow a gradual implementation of the protocol. However, it's important to dispel the myth that triggering Article 16 would get rid of the protocol, as some people seem to believe. The protocol is now part of an international treaty signed up to by the EU and the UK, who after all were its architects. This border in the Irish Sea, as I mentioned, has incensed some of the hardline unionists in Northern Ireland. But it's important to remember that the protocol was negotiated by the British government, who were supported in Parliament by the unionist DUP, and who are now, ironically, the protocol's greatest opponents. The DUP were huge supporters of Brexit. Another irony in all this is that Northern Ireland, in the EU referendum, like Scotland, voted to stay in the EU. So the protocol is seen by the majority of people in Northern Ireland as something that mitigates damage done to the stability when the UK as a whole exited the EU. In short, now that Brexit has happened, the protocol is supported by the majority of political parties in Northern Ireland. There's been enthusiasm to make the protocol work with everyone, except the hardline unionists and Conservative government, the latter having negotiated it, signed it and agreed to implement it. As it stands, not all checks on goods that will be required are taking place. This is because of the grace period I mentioned that were put in place to facilitate the initial implementation. The EU has said that this, in itself, is a breach of international law. The story continues. I hope this video has been informative. Please give it a like if it was, and consider subscribing to the channel to support future videos.